It's been many years since I first watched it, but I still think Blade Runner is my favourite film. Mainly because it's a film that has so many ideas within it, especially ideas about humanity and the self. But at the same time, of course, it has that beautiful cyber noir aesthetic that works with the ideas of the film as well. So it's a sort of intellectual film, or it's a conceptual film, but its aesthetics really chime with the ideas. And of course it's slow as well. And I think it's also a film that rewards multiple viewings. And so because of that slowness and because of that rewarding multiple viewings quality that it has, then I would say that was probably one big reason why it didn't do very well when it was first released. And the film only really got rehabilitated in the 90s when the director's cut surfaced. I think that was around the early 90s. There was a work print cut as well. And it was a cut that didn't have the tacked on happy ending where they took the opening of The Shining and stuck it on the end of the film to show that they'd escaped the horrible cyber noir metropolis and they were off on their way to a happy future. And of course they took away the voiceover as well, the notorious voiceover. So it's a film that I have a lot of ideas about, and I'm sure I've written about it loads, and I'm sure I will probably do one of these videos about it at some point when I've run out of all other ideas, and then I know that I can just hit that one because I know that I have so much to say about it. But because of that enthusiasm that I had for Blade Runner, I've been looking out over the years for the other film that might be the Blade Runner of our time. Now, one film that I thought might be was Looper, actually, by Ryan something. I've forgotten his name, the guy who directed The Last Jedi. Rian Johnson. And as much as I like Looper, I think it is just your standard sci-fi thriller with a bit of a concept going, but I don't think it ever goes that deep. It doesn't allow the concept really to ask bigger philosophical questions in my mind's eye. It might be that more astute people than me have noticed more from it. I think the Matrix films, actually, especially the Matrix sequels, it could be that they're the Blade Runners of their time. There were particularly things I enjoyed about the last Matrix film, which in some ways is a bad film. The action sequences are terrible, but there are many arguments that many other people have made that it is sort of intentionally bad. I mean, the very fact that it kind of ditches the cinematic qualities of the first three films and looks more like an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm in places, I think, it has that TV quality to it. That might, I've written about that as well, actually, or spoken about it, I should say. But I'm not going with any of those films because there was one film that I really felt might have been the one that did that. And it's a film I watched a few times over the past 10 years. It came out 10 years ago. I've noticed with this channel that I'm gravitating towards analyses of films that came out 10 years ago, being that my Frank video is probably doing a bit better than all the other videos at the moment. So here I am returning to that, hoping to strike gold again. But a film that came out 10 years ago that I thought might be the one was Wally Pfister's Transcendence, starring Johnny Depp, Paul Bettany, Rebecca Hall, Morgan Freeman, and Cillian Murphy. I keep forgetting Cillian Murphy's name. He's just won the Best Actor Oscar, and I feel like I'm betraying my people by doing that, showing myself to be a proper second-generation traitor to the Irish. But Cillian Murphy doesn't have a lot to do in the film, I have to say. He just plays Agent Buchanan. Kate Mara is also in the film, and a few others. Now, I really thought that this would be the one. I don't know why, but it was because it was a film I watched, and even though I already felt that some parts were rough around the edges, I felt that it did have ideas, and I did mull over those ideas and think about those ideas. So ideas about the self. I was very much into sort of reading about consciousness and a lot of the studies around consciousness, particularly because I was eager to find the definitive materialistic explanation of consciousness so I could finally banish my metaphysical anxieties after I'd become a bit of a crusading atheist for a while. Not so much now. So I wanted them to just stitch up that hard problem of consciousness as quickly as possible. That's one I won't go into now. So I think I was into films that played with the ideas about whether we could upload our consciousness, for instance. Now, the last few series of Black Mirror have definitely overplayed that trope quite a bit, I think, and I can understand why the Charlie Brooker has tried to veer off into more supernatural genres of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, rather than stick with that same sort of riff that he's been playing quite a lot, the uploaded consciousness riff. So I think at the time it was one of a few films, I'm sure there were a few more, but it was one of a few films that was really tackling this idea. So maybe that's another reason why I gravitated towards it. This is just a short way of saying that I decided, you know what, there's something I can talk about. But I need to watch it again. I need to watch it one more time before I can write my essay about it and then do my video. And so I watched it. I watched it this week, ready to go. Okay, here we go. And I was thinking to myself, you know what, I could watch this, and maybe the video that I make will be the big thing that rehabilitates Transcendence, and everyone sees Transcendence for the flawed masterpiece that it really is. And I'll be tied to it, and maybe they'll have a big premiere when they re-release it, and I'll be the guest of honour, and there'll be like a new thing spliced into the end credits saying thank you to Niall O'Sullivan for believing in this gem. So with all this racing around my head, I watched it one more time this week, and I ended up agreeing with the critics and the audiences. It just went right down in my estimation. I didn't enjoy it as much, and I think the flaws of the film were far more apparent this time. By the way, my name is Niall. I'm a poet who makes videos and writes essays because the muse has abandoned me. It was already pretty late in the week, and my working routine with this is to write an essay and then make the video. And so I had a few days just to knock out the essay, so I knew that ultimately that was it. I was committed to this course. But I was very wary of writing what I wanted to write in some ways, because there have been enough, the critics have already beaten 7 bells out of this film, beaten the granny out of it, as William Regal would say. And I didn't want to be the person sort of, as it's just been left there in the street, who looks around, makes sure there's no one there, and then puts a few boots in myself. So I didn't really want to be part of a long delayed version of the piling on after I'm the person who was defending it for ages. So instead, what I'll talk about is the ideas of the film, and perhaps why I found the ideas captivating at one point, but how I don't find the execution of those ideas captivating or convincing anymore. And hopefully that will feel less than me just giving the film a kicking. So what did I like about the film? As I've already said, I like the ideas, and I think the film looked great as well. So Wally Pfister, who's the director, it was his directorial debut. And before that, he was the director of photography in many of Christopher Nolan's films. I think from Memento, from Nolan's first film, all the way up to Batman Begins. And on the way, he won the Oscar for Best Cinematography for Inception. And I think because of that, even though the director of photography is Jess Hall in this film, and Jess Hall you might know from the films from Hot Fuzz and Son of Rambo as well. So Jess Hall, very capable cinematographer, and I don't want to necessarily say that all their work is really Wally Pfister operating them like a puppet. But I can say that there do seem to be a lot of callbacks within the imagery of this film to some of his other films. He teases the idea of sort of flash forwards and flashbacks, and there are flash forwards and flashbacks throughout the film to do with the idea of water, and I guess water becomes very instrumental to the things that are happening in the film later on. And we don't really know if these are flash forwards and flashbacks, but this is obviously something that we know from Nolan's films, and sometimes I felt that Pfister perhaps could have brought in a few more flashbacks to flesh out the motivations of the main characters in this film, because I think that was one of my biggest problems with it, which I'll get onto in a minute. So visually it's amazing. Perhaps the most striking image in the film is of course Johnny Depp as Will Castor, and it's a film that was used in the promotion materials and the poster, and it's when he's got all of these wires plugged into his skull, wires and sockets, and they're all kind of, his head is shaved, his eyes are looking a bit sort of baggy. And it's almost like a riff on Frankenstein in one sense, but like almost like this wire, sort of hair Frankenstein. But there's also callbacks to the Crown of Thorns as well, and the Easter story. And of course, this whole film, I know I've not described the plot yet, and there will be spoilers for the plot ahead, so be wary of those. But the film is very much a retelling of the Easter story in some ways, or the New Testament, in the sense that, the main character dies, then he rises again, and then I guess he's sort of transfigured as well, or he becomes this ever-present Holy Spirit by the end of the film, which is still present in a minor way. So that image is a very strong image. Similarly, there are other strong images, the images of sunflowers with water dripping from them as well. This is cheekily borrowed from E.T., which in its own way is already a New Testament story. I'll just go through this very quickly because it's one of those things I could make a video about, but I just don't think I can be bothered. So just very quickly, E.T., New Testament story. That's why they show it on TV at Easter sometimes. Why is that? Well, because E.T. sort of arrives on Earth. I know that's a rubbish way of beginning it, but there are particular tropes. The miracles, the healings that he does, for instance. The point when he actually brings the sunflower back to life. So the sunflower is Lazarus. The apostles, the other kids on bicycles, the BMX apostles. The point where he goes up to the mountain to phone home before he grows ill and is captured. And I think that's important as well because that reflects on the time when Jesus also goes up to the mountain before he's betrayed by Judas, and he wants to pray to God, and he asks John and his disciples not to fall asleep, and then John falls asleep anyway. And the same thing happens. E.T. goes up to the mountain to phone home, and Elliot falls asleep, and then he's found. They find E.T. and E.T. is pale and ill. Then E.T. is captured, much like Christ is captured as well. He then dies, and he then rises again. And ultimately he ascends into the heavens at the end of the film. Now there's other elements of it as well. The motif of him pointing to his heart, a lot of Catholic imagery around Christ is him pointing to his heart as well. And also even the part when E.T. gets drunk at home and Elliot starts acting rowdy and releases all the frogs in the classroom, it mirrors that time when Jesus went wild and trashed the temple as well. There's more. Even the flying on the bikes is the great miracle, the miracle of walking on water and so on. So there's the miracle of Lazarus, which is the sunflower, but there's also the miracle of flying on BMX bikes, mirroring the miracle of walking on water. You look for them, there are so many parallels, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'm just going to talk about how it got borrowed by Transcendence as well, with the sunflower, with the nanoparticle water dripping from it, the healed sunflower. I think the imagery is great. It's a fantastic looking film. That said, the action sequences are kind of bad and ropey. But then again, Nolan was never that great at action either. I don't think Nolan has ever done a brilliant action sequence. He's improved, but I don't think he's been a definitive action director despite all the action that features in many of his films. So yeah, it's Pfister's first directorial effort. Now, as you might already know, the film did not perform well. I think it ended up making a loss of something like at least $30 million after everything, after all the world box office and all the promotion. And it wasn't critically well received either. And Pfister never made a film again. He never directed a film again. He's directed adverts. Famously, he directed the notorious Matt Damon crypto advert, where Matt Damon's walking around a futuristic environment and says, "Fortune favours the bold." Obviously, crypto has been a disaster. Yesterday, Bankman-Fried was sentenced to 25 years in jail for his part in the FTX fraud. And actually, "Fortune favours the bold" is a worthwhile. It's a worthwhile catchphrase because it comes from Pliny the Elder, the Roman historian, who shouted "Fortune favours the bold" moments before he either was on a boat or he was running, but he headed towards, I think it was Vesuvius was erupting, and he headed towards it shouting "Fortune favours the bold," and was killed moments later. So it's always used as this idea of inspiration, but actually it's coined by a person who shouted it before he did something stupid and died. Fortune did not favour him. So that's the imagery. I don't want to spend too long talking about the imagery, but I do think it's a really good looking film, and I love a good looking sci-fi film. But the other thing I like from a sci-fi film is the ideas. So what ideas are explored in Transcendence? Okay, so the ideas explored in Transcendence are, firstly, primarily the singularity. Then, as well, there's the idea of humanity and can we upload a human consciousness. I think in some ways that's a more interesting idea than the idea of a singularity. And the final idea, which I don't think is the explicit idea of the film, but it's the one I take away from most, is the idea about freedom and agency and the role that freedom and agency play in society. I'll get to that one at the end because I think that is the most important, interesting thing to get from Transcendence. But I'll deal with the other things first. So the singularity. The singularity is what William Gibson dismissed as the geek rapture, and I still think William Gibson was right. We live in times when AI is now becoming much more of a casual tool. It is beginning to varying degrees, infiltrate our culture as a tool or as a series of tools. And because of that, I think we've let go of the idea of an AI being this singular intelligence. One thing, because human intelligence isn't really singular at all. It's a sort of spectrum of proficiencies and capabilities. There are many ways of being intelligent. There are many ways in which a brain works, and it's not really this singular quality that we call intelligence, despite all those Mensa people what they might say about their intelligence being a certain number. It's not just abstract reasoning, it's emotional reasoning, it's spatial reasoning, it's linguistic reasoning, it's mathematical reasoning, it's so many things. And so what's happened with AI is that they're just very specialized in one particular thing. The best AI are the ones that are doing the most good. So while AI video, I think there's still plenty of flaws with that. We do have great things like AI being able to spot cancer. And actually that is something that is mentioned in Transcendence. So that is something that Transcendence gets right, which is Paul Bettany's character. I'll talk about the characters in a second, but he's giving a speech before Johnny Depp's character gives his speech. And he's saying that he's interested in AI because of the accidental things that are found along the way, such as things that can spot the early signs of cancer and Alzheimer's. And that's what AI is actually doing. So that's a hit for the film. But I think the idea of the singularity, as we come to understand AI more and actually have AI working within our lives, I think the singularity idea has lost a bit of its cultural cachet. I think it's not as strong an idea as before, because I think we're seeing AI as a series of disparate tools rather than as one particular superhuman robot mind thingy. So that's one way in which I think this film has aged. Now, let me get onto the basics of the plot. Once again, final warning for plot spoilers. I don't really want this to be a plot-heavy trudge through the film. I just want to be able to bring up the plot in relation to the ideas that it deals with. So, very quickly, the film stars, the main stars are, as I've already said, Johnny Depp as Will Caster, Rebecca Hall as Evelyn Caster. So Will Caster is the visionary genius, and Evelyn Caster is also a bit of a genius, but she's more of an idealist. It seems that he's the one who's more capable of the hard science. I know that's already weird gender stuff going on there, and she's more of a person who's looking at its applications throughout the world. Then there's Paul Bettany, who's another scientist, but I think he works within ideas of the human brain and human health. And he plays a scientist called Max Waters. And there's also Morgan Freeman, who plays a scientist who's a sort of friend and mentor to Will and Evelyn Caster, who's called Joseph Tagger. And then there's also Cillian Murphy, who plays Agent Bortigan. And I don't know, one thing I find really funny is how all the names of the main characters sound the same. Will Caster, Joseph Tagger, Max Waters. Everyone's basically called aren't they? That's their names. It's like a riff on The names also sound like the kind of name Troy McClure might have in an FBI thriller that he's made straight for TV as well. So, yeah, that's something that I find vaguely ridiculous about the film. So the film begins with a few things. It begins with Will Caster giving his big speech, and as he's giving his big speech about Pin, which is his neural network model AI that he's built, and he's talking about the singularity, but he calls it transcendence. And the singularity is obviously, if you don't know what singularity is, I've just been talking about it, but singularity is the moment when machine intelligence overtakes human intelligence, and then it continues exponentially. So all the things that we thought impossible, the machine intelligence starts doing all of those things. Hence why William Gibson called it the geek rapture. So he's espousing as that. I should also mention that in this scene, there's, you know, like how you have all those 90s films that you watch them and then there's like a Donald Trump cameo, like Home Alone 2, and it's just a bit weird. I think people are going to feel the same about films made in the 2010s with Elon Musk just turning up for moments, like Iron Man, and he's in here as an audience member doing the pensive man watching something pose. Will Caster's giving a speech while at the same time these attacks are happening on his business and infrastructure and on his projects. So Morgan Freeman's character, Joseph Tagger, is working in his office. Someone's having a birthday. A cake's been brought in by the terrorists who are called Rift. Rather than try and remember what Rift stands for, I'm just going to put it here. That's Rift. I'm also going to talk about the artificial intelligence pin. Sorry, I burped there. The artificial intelligence pin. That's what it means as well, the acronym. Now I don't have to define it anymore. Okay. So he's working in his office, and then there's another man who's actually played by quite a big actor. So big I've forgotten his name. And he goes downstairs and goes into his office as well. And so there's this multi-pronged attack that is made where there's a bomb planted in the office, but also people eat birthday cake, and the birthday cake is poisoned. And it just so happens that Joseph Tagger is handed some birthday cake, but he sticks it to the side that he has work to get on with. And then I don't know where it's almost implied that the explosion happens in his office. The film's editing is not great. But he doesn't really hear the explosion. He takes a headphone off, notices the office is quiet, looks around, and then everyone's dead. But they're not looking all kind of blown up. I say that's confusing because the woman who gives him his cake, she's at the desks when they explode. So you assume she's in the same office. So it's all very confusing. Similarly, the famous guy, who I know is in The Walking Dead and a few other things, who plays this other scientist, who must have had more scenes that hit the cutting room floor. You just see a very quick shot of him and a monkey watching him in the lab, and he just goes like that. And I had to watch it on 0.25 speed to see that there was someone choking him. But they just hacked it away. You can bet you just see him go like that. This is one of the problems with the film, and I think one of the problems with the film is that lots of it has been hacked away. So all these attacks happen because of this, what they call neo-Luddite, but of course the Luddites weren't necessarily anti-tech, they were just anti the exploitation of tech, whereas this group Rift are very much anti-tech. So there's their attack, people are killed, and then after his talk, a man approaches Will Caster during his talk and says, "So you want to make another god?" And Will Caster just goes, "Who isn't trying to make another god?" And then they cut to him outside the next scene. The Bree, who seems to be the leader of Rift, she's been watching the talk, and she's seen outside after the talk as well, and she basically just does this throughout the film. That's it. That's the thing she does. She's just like, I don't know why I had to take the glasses off that, but she just glowers her way through the whole film. And then so she's glowering at him, and then she glowers a bit more outside after Will is shot by the man who asked him the question. Then the man does the old, does himself in afterwards. And so Will's been hurt, but he's not hurt that bad. But then it turns out that he's been poisoned by polonium from the bullet, and he only has weeks left to live. And so that's the whole plot set in motion, which is after some umming and ahhing, they decide, you know what, we're gonna upload his consciousness and then upload it to PIN, the neural network, and then we'll upload him online or something like that. I can't remember. And Max goes along with this for Evelyn's sake, and even Will Caster is saying, you know what, I don't know if I believe in this, but let's just do it for her. What's the worst thing that can happen? Create a demonic, all-powerful AI that overtakes humanity and becomes a god. You know. Risks of the profession. You know, we'll have to fill out a safety audit first. You know, a risk evaluation. World domination of all-powerful godlike AI. So he's uploaded. So they put all these things on him, and they upload his consciousness, or create a digital version of his brain and his brain activity. And then he dies on his couch. I think he dies in his sleep. And they upload him. And there's a few hiccups firstly in the process. It's like it's not working, and then he starts writing on the screen hello, and then they put him on the speakers and they get a webcam going so he can see. Now leaving the lab. No, he goes to a bar later on. Max is abducted by Rift. And Evelyn somehow puts Will on a laptop, because even though she's got all these big machines, he's powerful enough to stick on a laptop. I don't know, maybe she uploads him. I think she might upload him before she leaves. And then Rift stormed the lab, but she's already left. You know, seconds to go. She's already uploaded him. It's too late. He's in the internet now. That's another point that I think has dated a bit, which is this idea of he wants to be uploaded to the internet, and he says, I want to check out Wall Street and stuff like that. And Max says to Evelyn, when was Will ever curious about Wall Street? You know, when was he ever curious about what's going on in the world? And I don't know, they don't really develop the character that much. There's one point in his speech where he says, my wife wants to change the world, I just want to understand. Okay, fair enough, but it's a throwaway line in a speech. There's nothing to really convince us. And the film, unfortunately, and this is what I really noticed on this watch, which is that the film, that's what it does all the way through. It just kind of expects us to take things on trust. So people change their mind about stuff throughout the film, but it's just it's in response to just almost trivial things that they suddenly change their minds and act very differently. Actually, no, they act the same, but in a different way. So where was I? Yeah, so he's uploaded. I find it funny that they're saying, you can't upload him, because that's a very 2010s or even 2000s understanding of the internet. You know, the fact that you make something away from the internet and then you put it on the internet, rather than the internet being part of a tool set that you use to make this kind of thing. So when you think about stuff like ChatGPT and Midjourney and DALL-E and all of these other projects that ultimately just went on the internet first, they went on the internet so they could steal all the art and writing that all these people didn't give their permission for it to take, for instance, allegedly. But there's court cases going on about that now at the moment anyway, so that's where I get that influence from. And so you have, it's just it's very quaint to sort of create something and then put it online, rather than actually part of its whole process of learning is to be online. So Evelyn is on the run. She's got, you know, he's on the internet now, and Will's he's already kind of growing in power and knowledge, and he's able to keep her safe, book her into a hotel, and then book her in somewhere else where he buys a town ultimately, and that's where they build their headquarters for how Will's going to create all the technology that will heal and save the world and change everything. So here's my main issue with the film during this watch, which is the film makes points about humanity, but it never really convinces us of. So we never really get to feel for Will and Evelyn's relationship. It never really gives us those special moments, which I think it could have done through maybe some flashbacks or some callbacks, but maybe Wally Pfister was too conscious that he'd have been very Nolan-like if he'd have done that. Maybe he had to kind of cut back on those Nolan-esque flourishes. So I didn't really feel much during that lead up. I was just, to be very honest, I just felt hurry up and die and become ChatGPT Jesus. That's what I felt. That's what I just wanted to see. I just wasn't very touched, and it's not really the fault. I think Johnny Depp does default to his laconic delivery, as does Morgan Freeman as well. And I don't know if Pfister was maybe a little bit in awe of his actors. Bettany does do a kind of good enough job of emoting, but he just kind of looks bewildered a lot of the time, and his character doesn't seem to have proper agency. And I think Rebecca Hall's the only one that really sells it, the one that really has this emotional connection within the film and is the emotional heart of the film and makes it convincing in that sense. I don't think other people were that convincing in the film. Back to where I was, and again, I don't really want to do an exposition dump of the whole film, so let's just go with those ideas. There's a point earlier where Max is saying we don't even understand what the human brain is, so how can we understand if this thing is conscious? And that's a really fair judgment of any kind of AI that we create. I know that neural networks are slightly different because they're more things that learn independently and grow on their own, and therefore perhaps are more organic in that way. But it's still, we haven't reversed engineered human consciousness yet, so we can't necessarily say whether an AI is properly conscious as we are conscious. So that's a good point. But then he goes on to make this other point as they're uploading him, where he says, oh, if we miss out on a single thought, a single dream, a single memory, then it won't be him. And I thought, okay, so basically all the people who have maybe Alzheimer's or any brain injury that affects their memory, do they immediately stop being who they are as the memories begin to vanish? And what about, I don't know, how about the whole human race? How about the whole human race as well? In a sense that I've probably forgotten stuff in the last 10 minutes. Does that mean I'm no longer me? It's a really silly idea, but it's just sort of reeled off like it's fact and everyone accepts it. And unfortunately, people are just convinced by silly ideas all the way through the film. So before I get onto Morgan Freeman's character, Joseph, one of the big sort of turnarounds in the film is that everyone starts, as Will becomes more powerful, AI Will becomes more powerful, everyone ends up joining Rift, the terrorist organisation. So the first to go over is Max after he's been abducted, and he just very quickly joins their side. Now, what is it that convinces him to join their side? Well, Bree, played by Kate Mara, she visits him in his little locked up Faraday cage. A Faraday cage is meant to be something that you can't get internet in, basically, so the internet can't permeate it. But so he's locked up in his Faraday cage for some reason, or in some kind of cage, and she comes in and she gives him her backstory. And her backstory is that she worked on a previous lab with, I think, the professor who was choked to death, although you can't really see it when it happens. And she says how she worked with him on the project where a rhesus monkey had its consciousness uploaded, but when they uploaded the consciousness of the rhesus monkey, all the digital version of the rhesus monkey could do was scream. It just screamed all the time. Okay, screaming monkey. And she also said, me and my friends would have meetings and we would talk about your ideas and your philosophies. We were such big fans. And then Max goes, like his mind's been blown, and it's like, terrorists were fans and digital screaming monkey. Is that all it takes? Is that all it takes? Now, to be fair, it is implied that Max has his doubts from the very beginning that this is Will. But it's just that he's not. It's not like he's changing his political affiliations. It's not like he's decided, I'm not going to vote Labour, I'm going to vote Green, or something like that. It's the people that murdered his friend and killed lots of other people. He's siding with them now because of screaming digital monkey. And a similar thing happens with Morgan Freeman's character, who earlier on in the film when he meets Pin, so that's the neural network that Will is working on, he asks Pin, can you prove that you are conscious? And Pin kind of says, that's a very difficult question, Dr. Tagger. Can you prove you're conscious? And something like that. And then when he meets the AI Will later on, who has been uploaded to Pin, he asks the same question, and Will gives the exact same answer that Pin gave. And so he goes walking off and he's like, okay, that's it, it's Pin, it's not really Will, it's Pin. But it's just one answer to a question. It's kind of, you just think, like when you ask ChatGPT if it's conscious, it gives basically the baked in answers it's been instructed to give. It might change the wording, but it's quite obvious that the programmers have kind of said there's a whole risk of someone thinking that it's a real intelligence, and we don't want people doing that and suing us. Famously, a researcher on Google's AI Lambda, which I think is now Gemini, he became convinced it was conscious and then got fired ultimately from his job. So it's programmed to say these things, and I just got this feeling that like that would be one of the canned answers that would be hard coded into it. So the answer might have come from Will anyway, and Will might have just been witty. Maybe he remembered the answer that Pin gave, being that he was there when it happened, and therefore he was just repeating the same answer. There's lots of reasons, aren't there? But that's it. But again, I'm not saying it's not enough for someone to change their mind, but Tagger just immediately joins forces with the people that tried to kill him and slaughtered all of his colleagues. He's just like, okay, off I go over there. And I think that's the problem with this film, is that people keep changing their minds. Evelyn goes over to them as well, and it's similarly just because Max says something and she goes, oh, all right then. And people keep changing their minds in this film, but it's just they're presented with this particular argument and then they just furrow their brow and then they go over. There's no feeling of revelation. There's no feeling of the having it out someone has of themselves. They're just like, oh, I'm like this, but what about the digital screaming monkey? Oh right, okay, let's kill people. It's like that. What other thing do I pick holes with? So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the idea of it, the film is constantly making the point about how precious humanity is and how it shouldn't be replaced, and how in some ways people that it portrays as the heroes embark or endorse violent force for this outcome. And the other interesting thing is, so there's a labourer called Martin, and he is the man that when Evelyn walks into the dead end town at first before she buys it, because Will says this is where we will build, she contacts him in the old rundown diner and says this is where we're going to be building and I want you to be the foreman. And he's like, do you really want, if you want advice from me, don't build here. And then she does that thing that rich people do to the working classes in films, where she just flexes her wealth and says stuff like, we've already bought this town. By the time this conversation is over, we'll already own this diner. You know what I mean? It's just like, you having objections? I'm rich. Go away. Do you want money? Here's some money. Would you want some money? Fetch. Like that. So the reason why this is important is because Martin undergoes a transformation. So what happens with Martin is that he's working at night on these silos and stuff, and then two scumbags from the town, two toe rags, two ne'er-do-wells, find him, beat him up, steal his money. And he's so badly injured, he's brought in the next day, and there's no time to take him to the hospital. And what happens is that he's put on a gurney, and then AI Will takes over with his little finger pointy thingies, and he's magically healed. I mean, they're already regenerating dead plant matter and stuff like that, but they're able to bring Martin back. And not only does he bring Martin back, but Martin is also enhanced. So it shows a shot of Martin lifting some big metal thing and putting it up, and it's obviously something that you need a crane or maybe a digger to lift up, and help place there, but he can just do it on his own now because he's got super strength. And so Martin has a chat with Evelyn, and the next moment, Martin, she asks how he's doing. He's like, I feel great. And the next moment, Martin suddenly changes. He takes off his helmet, almost like he becomes less working class. And he turns around to Evelyn and he's talking in Will's voice, and he's saying, we can be together now. I can take control of him. And so that's meant to be the horrifying moment. The fact that, and Evelyn is horrified and she walks away, she's freaked out by it. But it's meant to be that horrifying moment, which is these human beings who've been enhanced, who've been cured, they've now their bodies can be commandeered by the AI, by AI Will / Pin. And that's the horrifying thing. But what have we seen of Martin's humanity? we've barely seen anything. He's just a member of the proletariat who's like a useful dog's body, whose objections get swiped away by money, and that's it. And I think that's another problem with the film. I get it. We all walk into a film valuing human life, but I still think that value has to be portrayed in the world of the film as well for us to buy into it as a central thesis or hypothesis. So, and I think this is where the interesting ideas of the film take form. So I've been quite dismissive, and in some ways, even with the interesting ideas, I might be a little bit dismissive. Let me just cough this up now, because what happens is that Will is able to use these workers, these members of a proletariat, these people from the town. I mean, I guess there's an interesting argument of class being made here, whether it's made wittingly or not. Later on in the film, actually, there's an interesting point where all these people that he's healing and have working for him, the two ne'er-do-wells, who were the people that beat up Martin, they're now employed as well. Now, Martin is actually killed later on in the film. And he's killed because he's not able to regenerate, because he's separated via a Faraday cage which has been built underground, so he can't heal, so he dies. And they kind of say stuff like, quite callous stuff like, he's already dead. What the miserable approximation of a life that he had is over. And it's like, really? He seemed kind of happy. I know he had moments where he surrendered his freedom, but other than that, I can lift everything up. So they orchestrate an attack, and I have to say this. So before Martin is captured and then dies of his injuries because they just shoot him, they orchestrate an attack, and the attack is, and now to be fair, actually, when they shoot him, it might be because of what happens during the attack, which is that the proletariat, who are heralded to defend Will's AI. That's what I'm saying, which is, it's interesting that his army are made of a proletariat and how there's almost like a divide and conquer quality to things. But so what happens? Let me explain this attack, because I do think it's a really bad action scene, where firstly Rift, they've been digging underground, and they have these underground tunnels very near where the field of panels, solar panels is. Where Will's base is, and most of Will's base is underground, but there's a face-off where these explosions happen, and then Rift kind of just come jumping out from underground, like they've blown up the ground, and then they come up through the holes made in the ground. And it's like, that's not how it works that way in a ninja film, where the ninja's done some kind of forced field blast and then kind of jumps out, why, lands, does the pose, that maybe a few somersaults along the way. That's what we expect from ninjas, but it's not a ninja film. So when a film that's meant to be slightly realistic, we just think of ground explosion, doesn't it just all cave in again? It does not create this neatly climbable hole that you can like run out of and go, aha, surprise. And then there's an action scene, which is all of these workers who've been enhanced, and Rift have got their machine guns, and the workers are there. And it's just a couple of minutes of Rift just shooting them kind of falling down, and then regenerating and coming back up. Now, actually, the coming back up effect is quite good. They kind of do this weird sort of upwards thing, which is like a cross between The Undertaker and Michael Jackson in the Smooth Criminal video when he leans forward. But so that's all right. But ultimately, it's just two groups of people facing each other. Some shooting their guns at them, and then the others going, and then coming back up. And it just goes on like that. It's just it's like a school disco, a Catholic school disco with the girls on one side, boys on the other. But this is like the neo-Luddites and the enhanced people instead. So yeah, the action's not very good. And I don't think the action is necessary in this film, especially when it's as silly as that. Let me get on to just what I think is the great argument, again, to try and avoid an exposition dump. So it turns out there's the threat to human consciousness. Lots of people have joined the Rift side, and ultimately Will creates nanoparticles, which are absorbed into the clouds, and then they rain, and that spreads the nanobots everywhere. And nanobots are basically able to kind of solve all of these problems. I mean, not only is he able to cure people of their illnesses and maladies, but the nanobots are able to repair the damage to the environment and stuff like that, regrow the rainforests, repair, I don't know if there's still damage to the ozone layer, but why not? Have a little look up there, check the roofing, you know what I mean, on planet Earth, that's fine. And So it's doing all this good stuff. And I think that the central thesis of the film, and I think this is the idea that I do still think about, is the film says, we will make everything better. We will heal the planet. We will heal humans. We will deal with scarcity. We will bring an end to all these diseases and all this misery. And it will all be one big kumbaya moment. Things will be perfect. Or as perfect as we can make them. What's the price of this? A little bit of your freedom. You know, so as signified when these people can suddenly become soldiers and be operated by will, that's the price to pay. And that's why Rift and these other main characters who've gone over to their side act so violently against it. And I think that's really interesting because it's a cultural thing, isn't it? This idea of freedom. And America is definitely a country where freedom is a very big thing. And we know that. We'll go into why we know that in a minute. I mean, but it's baked into the Constitution, you could say. Freedom of speech, freedom to bear arms as well. So, which isn't necessarily found in other countries. And I do think that if this had taken place in some Eastern countries where the individual is not as big a thing, where there is more of a sense of collective mindedness, or even in some of the Scandinavian social democracies, if this thing was, I think the film would have been very short. If a central proposition of the film is, oh, we can heal everything, we can make everything better, you just have to surrender a little bit of your freedom. Some other countries, people would have just gone, how much freedom would you like? And that would have been the end of it. But being that it's America, they have a bit of a thing for freedom, don't they? And so while I was watching the film, and this is a few years back, I'm watching it thinking, oh my God, they're like the freedom Taliban. They're like setting, because by the end of the film, I might as well just give away the end of the film now anyway. So Evelyn is brought over to Rift's cause, and then she agrees to be injected with something, I can't remember what it is, some kind of particles, and that means that she'll be connected to a virus that Max is going to upload, and then when she's uploaded to Will's big super consciousness, she will, when the virus is uploaded, she will infect all of it. And there's more to it than that, but I'm not going to go into it. Will in the end works out the ruse, but allows it to happen anyway, because it's what Evelyn wants. Also, actually, I will say one thing which I didn't say in the essay that I wrote about this, which is that Max creates a physical version of himself. And interestingly, I think one of the, near the end of the film, and one of the objections to the idea of an AI being conscious is that sense of physical embodiment. And so when she's reunited with Will and they kind of die together once the virus is uploaded and they're lying in the bed together, which is kind of a bit like a bed in a recreation of their old home, she does say to him, you know, is it really you? And he says, like, it was me all along. Is it? I think it's him there, but was it always him? I don't know. I mean, how can it be him if it's some super fat, powerful, godlike thing, you know? Anyway, but I can agree that it's probably him when he's there as a physical body. Why not? But back to freedom. So, and then what happens is that this attack doesn't just kill Will and kill all his nanobots, it wipes out the internet. So this is it. The Freedom Taliban get their caliphate, which is ultimately a kind of place with no internet at all. Technology isn't working. Laptops are being used to hold doors open and stuff like that. Human progress has been set back hundreds of years. And so I think that's kind of interesting. Because the film makes this point, doesn't it? The film really does seem to side on Rift by the end, and the film does seem to make that argument that no, above all else, freedom is the most important thing. And so there I was watching it, thinking, ha ha ha, freedom Taliban, ha 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 ha. You know what? Guess what? Guess what we got? You know, so anyone who watches the news in America, through two things really. Firstly, the pandemic. And then, of course, the January 6th insurrection, the attack on the Capitol. There we go. That's where we get our freedom fundamentalists. I mean, when you watch the film of the what is it, the QAnon shaman, as he's called, when he is walking into the Capitol, he keeps on shouting, freedom, like that. bit like George Michael. And so, but all I'm saying is that in 2014 and a little bit later when I watched the film, I found this idea of freedom fundamentalists to be quaint, but they became a real thing within the 10 years. And that's something I guess that the film, even though the film wasn't necessarily going out of its way to condemn that, the film predicted that quite well. And so, but also that idea of that deal that we had to make about freedom, and the pandemic was perhaps the biggest example of that, where in different countries we all gave up freedoms to varying degrees. Some countries had more severe lockdowns than others. Some had severe lockdowns and didn't really thrive. Some, like New Zealand, had severe lockdowns, and when they had happened, they would just happen very quickly. There'd be a big cooperation happening, and then they'd reopen and everyone would be back in stadiums again watching gigs and matches and stuff like that, living the life. Now obviously New Zealand is a country that's easier to isolate itself as well from other countries, so that probably helped too. It's going to be trickier in a big old landmass like Europe, but we all had this experience of giving up a bit of our freedom for the collective health of the nation. And so sacrifices were made, and then some governments made sacrifices as well by basically giving everyone furlough and stuff like that to varying degrees too. So this deal with freedom, we've all experienced it. Now there's some interesting examples, like Sweden is a country that didn't have a big lockdown, if I remember right. It didn't go as heavy on the limitations to freedoms, but that was partially because Sweden was a country which in its own way was quite civic minded, and I think that the government trusted that civic mindedness rather than making it as a big appeal to the liberty of the individual, whereas its neighbour Norway did go for heavier measures, but there was much more faith in the government and much more cooperation with that. And so it's not a surprise ultimately in the end that Norway did a lot better than Sweden as far as the death toll and other things were concerned. Now, I'm from the UK, so we were somewhere in the middle, in the sense that there were quite severe lockdowns, but then everything would be lifted relatively quickly. And I think Boris Johnson ultimately, firstly, famously parties in Downing Street and all that kind of thing, but also, the libertarians of his party had him by the short and curlies as well. I think he probably was one of those libertarians himself, and he was against locking down and would often lock down too late and then lift restrictions too early. Perhaps one of the most notorious things was the eat out to help out thing, which led to the second wave of COVID. That was our glorious Prime Minister Rishi Sunak who engineered that one. So we all have had this experience, but also, as I said, this idea of freedom being at the core of the insurrection as well, when people thought that the election had been stolen by Joe Biden. So this is what we call freedom fundamentalists. Why do we say fundamentalists? Well, there are many common goods in a society, and some of those common goods are the ones that Will was dealing with in the film. So that could be something like the environment, that could be health, that could be education, that could be freedom of religion and freedom from religion as well. That could be democracy as well. So there are many degrees of goods that, education that a society should provide, and just the basic food and shelter that everyone needs as well is I think another common good. And what makes a democracy function is that people offer different combinations or different degrees of importance to all of these factors, but normally they appeal to at least all of these factors. So yes, sacrifices from some have to be made for others, for instance, but ultimately people aren't ditching everything wholesale for one of them. And I think that's what makes the people rift in Transcendence. That's what ultimately makes them fundamentalists, because all these other good things doesn't matter. Human freedom is more important. And that in itself is interesting, because libertarianism ultimately, it rests on an idea of freedom that is related to what we would call dualism, Cartesian dualism, the idea that there's this separate soul operating the body, and that the soul itself is an uncaused causer. So the soul can cause things to happen. The soul can make the hand lift something up and then, I don't know, knock someone's drink over and have those consequences. So it can cause things to happen, but the decisions themselves aren't caused. And of course, the orthodoxy in philosophy and science is that there's definitely no uncaused, well, there's no evidence to believe in an uncaused causer. Ultimately, we are caused. But lots of factors cause us and cause us to make decisions about those actions. Now, how you fall on that particular fact will ultimately dictate your attitude. So if you are going with the orthodoxy, which is some people don't believe in freedom at all, so they just think, okay, my actions, my thoughts aren't caused, my actions aren't caused, my needs aren't caused. I mean, these are all caused. My needs, my actions, my will is caused in many ways. The things I want to do, I can't choose what I want. So if that's all caused, and then I have no free will. Whereas compatibilism is more a position that says it changes the idea of freedom a little bit to say, and compatibilism, if anything, is the dominant idea of what freedom is now. Compatibilism says, yes, you are caused, but ultimately your decisions are yours. You are the cause of your actions, even though you are caused, because lots of things that are the main causes of other things are caused. So for instance, Daniel Dennett put it like this, which is there are different stances to something. There's the physical stance. I can look at something and say, look at it in terms of its physical makeup. So the atoms, the quantum particles, whatever, all the physical events that make something up. Then he says there's the design stance, which is ultimately, it doesn't necessarily mean designed things, but things that could look like they're designed or whatever. Actually, no, he does say design, but he thinks one designer is natural selection, Darwinian natural selection. So design stance means when something has a kind of function. Or a purpose, you could say. That's when it's designed. And then finally, there's the intentional stance, where we can look at something and say it acted that way because of its intentions. Now, these are all just different stances we can take on the same thing. So if a train malfunctions and derails, we can say maybe because there was a malfunction or a rock on the tracks, that's what caused it. We don't have to go to the level of physics to say what happened in terms of particles and so on, and atoms. We don't have to go to the physical stance. So the intentional stance is a bit higher up, where we say, yes, that human has beliefs and desires and a will. And of course, those are all caused by lower level events. But ultimately, it's only meaningful when we look at that level of intention, which is ultimately caused. I hope that makes sense. That's me summing up the compatibilist argument, which is a tricky one to make. I think I will end it there. I could talk about this forever. So, you know what? I will end just by saying this, which is, firstly, there's an essay. If you want to read more on this, I wrote an essay about it, and I write the essays every Friday, and I tend to post these videos every Sunday. It's the Easter weekend, so I don't know how well I'll be able to get this edited in time, because I have things in the calendar to do. But I will end by saying, so I didn't think, and I hope I'm not being too mean to Transcendence, because I still think it's worth watching. And as I said, the ideas of freedom, I think, are the ideas that have actually carry on being relevant about this film. But what would I say? Has there been another film that perhaps we can say is the next Blade Runner? And I would say yes, there is. Blade Runner 2049. Duh. Thank you for watching. Have a good one. Bye bye.